Greetings, ANCAP Radio, and welcome back to another special edition of the show. I'm your host, Adam Carswell, also known as the Voice of Liberty, and today we are joined by a very good friend of mine, someone who happens to be active in real estate investing in the U.S. in particular, which if you listen to ANCAP Radio week over week, you know there's always massive amounts of skepticism when it comes to anything in the U.S. And really, when you think about it, skepticism tied to anything in the world that has to do with statism, really. But U.S. just given the size of it and all the publicity and everything tends to get made fun of and attacked the most. And I'm totally sympathetic to that. However, at the same time, I happen to know a lot of successful entrepreneurs, real estate entrepreneurs in particular, in America, doing well for themselves, avoiding becoming tax slaves. Which really, I think that's one of the number one things as an ANCAP is to dance around the traditional system, right? So someone who's totally mastered that, and if you don't believe me, I mean, he's coming to you live from California. I'll let you, I'll let him give the proper intro here, but that's kind of what we're going to talk about today is how to invest and it doesn't even have to be the U.S., but we're going to but we're going to focus primarily on U.S. real estate today. How to invest in the USSA and dodge all of the socialist bullets, and also really just how to live a free life in an area that a lot of us ANCAPs like to kind of throw rocks at. So on that note, I'd like to welcome to the stage here Mathew Owens. And Matt, if you could just give the audience a little bit of background on yourself and how you first became an anarcho-capitalist.
Absolutely, man. And how am I surviving living in communism in Southern California while I run a business myself and things like that? Of course, that's the fun part of being able to survive communism, you know. So out here in California. So thanks for the intro, man. I appreciate it. Just to give everybody a understanding, I'm a California licensed CPA, full-time real estate investor. I've flipped a little bit over 1,000 houses. We have over 35 million lent out to flippers in different markets around the country, and I've raised a little bit over $150 million for real estate over the last 18 plus years. So I quit my CPA firm job in 2006 to go into real estate. So I was a real estate genius for about a year and a half before I got my ass handed to me. And it's funny, as an entrepreneur, you realize how you start to wake up to the whole system and the whole tax system, the slave farm, and the whole thing, right? And you start to want to keep your own money, and you start to become more self-aware of what the government really does and how to escape the system. So it's an interesting thing as your learning goes through the roof as you become an entrepreneur and try to make your own money versus, I'd say, when I was working for someone else. Yeah, I didn't care that much, right? I wasn't focused on that as much, as I am now, of course. So it's an interesting change in mentality when you start to become an entrepreneur. So I entice everybody to, try to go that route as much as they can and take control of their future through their own, financial means versus, working for somebody else consistently, right? So.
Do you feel like that was really your tipping point personally, is when you stepped into entrepreneurship, you started to realize like, wait, everything's not really what I've been taught it to be?
Yeah, even yeah, absolutely, for sure. And it wasn't right away either. It was when I started actually making money, because of course in the beginning you're not really making a lot of money, in the beginning of your entrepreneur journey. And as you grow and as things come to light and you're trying to pay attention to the economy more, you're trying to pay attention to how money flows and how money works, you start to realize that literally everything is completely controlled by them. And I'll call them, for the lack of a better word, the deep state, and big pharma, and all the big corporations out there as well that control the world. And you start to see all of that, and it's clear as day when you pay attention to how the money flows and how the money works and the economic systems. And as you pay attention to economics, it becomes more and more apparent. And of course, then when 2020 happened, is full-fledged communism across the board, across the world, and that made me kind of even more realize, wow, we literally live in the matrix. Everything we've ever been told is a lie. And you start to go look at, hey, yeah, nationalism and, pledging to the flag and things like that. And you're like, wow, this is all a big brainwashing incident here. You know what I mean? Like everything is just a giant brainwashing incident that is just insane when you kind of peel back the layers and realize, like, hey, this is also that, we support, the U.S. terrorism organization, basically. At the end of the day, you can say it's for peacekeeping all you want, but that's just a big false lie too, right? Part of the matrix.
And
So,
you reminded me too, actually, early in my anarcho-capitalist journey, before I even really knew what the phrase or the term was. Um, Mutual friend of ours who is basically our main connecting point. Hopefully have him on the show eventually, because obviously he fits the mold, but don't want to throw any his attention his way until it's time. But I remember you were on his podcast, and it was one of the first shows on his show, and you used the phrase taxation is theft. And I had only, this was like 2016, 2017. I'd only
nice.
heard a few people use the phrase taxation is theft, and it was like Jeff Berwick and like, not a lot of people. And I was an ANCAP baby, and I remember thinking to myself, like, whoa, this guy that he just interviewed is a CPA in California, and he said taxation is theft. I'm like, I'm not crazy. Like, I actually am learning something that's true. And I remember you said that, dude, and it was like that. Actually, looking back on it, helped build some confidence in my own journey. So I don't know if you
And
have any thoughts on that one.
yeah, I mean, look, that's all a big ruse, right? Like the whole thing is a ruse. If you think about it deep down, if you're being honest with yourself about what actually is occurring, and you actually start to look at history, we had roads, bridges, and all that stuff before taxes, right? And actually, nonprofits are more efficient than the government. And so, you start to get massive corruption and theft at the government level is every single time the government's involved in pretty much anything, right? And so, you want to massively limit that government across the board. And when you look at where our tax dollars is going, they're just stealing 90% of it. The only reason we even have taxes in the first place is because they don't want us to wake up to the fact that they're stealing all of our money through inflation also. And if we're paying taxes, then their lie about money going to roads and bridges and things like that is complete bullshit, right? Like, I mean, it's just a complete, falsity. So, looking at it from that aspect of things, you see that throughout history, nonprofits and people have been much more efficient stewards of responsibility and their communities than governments have, right? I mean, just look at the country right now, right? Look at all the different aspects of this, and I would say the Democrat controlled cities, but Republicans are just as fake. I mean, they're just making money in a different way off of war. They're just all in a big fight for power, and both of them, suck horribly and are literally the biggest criminals on the planet. And they're just controlled opposition to get us to fight with each other instead of actually joining hands. And when we join hands and see eye to eye, we realize it's the government that's the problem in the first place. It's not all these, yeah, there's some crazy ass people out there, but at the end of the day, when you really sit down and talk to people, most people are pretty normal. Maybe some people are still brainwashed because they're still believing in I pledge allegiance to the flag stuff, and they still believe in roads or taxes are for roads and bridges or other examples like that, where what we've been told growing up across the board. Because it's a hard thing to break out of that mentally, to be like, okay, everything I was told is a lie. That's insane, right? I mean, think about health, for example. Pretty much Western medicine was funded by the Rockefellers, and they did campaigns against natural medicine specifically, which they to oust natural medicine doctors. So then that way we start working towards Western medicine instead. And pretty much everything we've been learned about our health is a lie as well. You start to look at every aspect of everything we've been told about life and our food and what we eat and stuff like that. The whole food pyramid. It's amazing how wrong that is, right? It's insane. And what were we taught growing up? That exact thing, right? So these are the things that are all misconceptions and part of what I call the matrix, or what a lot of people call the matrix. And you start to realize, wow, that Matrix movie is real, and they're doing like foreshadowing right now. I don't know if you guys knew this, but the Terminator was literally the first movie before the Matrix came out. Matrix was the second book that came out about it. It's literally the same story. So the more I look at it, the more the movies are just foreshadowing what they're trying to implement. It's pretty crazy. But maybe I'm crazy.
Right. No, no. What kind of blows my mind, and I'd love to hear how you navigate this. Having the successful real estate background that you do, a lot of the times, and Doug Casey talks about this too. A lot of the times, it seems like those who are very all in on the libertarian and anarcho-capitalist way of thinking um, aren't quite there financially from like an investor perspective, or
Yeah.
they're working on building their wealth. Like it seems like there's not a lot of wealthy libertarians out there now. As time has gone by, I've seen that's not true at all. I've met you and several others, but I want to know, like, for your investor base, which has to be pretty significant given the body of work that you've done, how do you get them to stick around with you? If they, or do they all believe that, like, similarly with you, or how do you navigate maybe people who think you are crazy but still want to invest with you?
I tell them that I'm crazy because then it's like, look, maybe I'm just crazy, because that way it doesn't hurt their ego if they disagree with me. You know what I mean? And at the same time, I also try to explain to them, here's the risks that I think I see out there in the market, and many times they agree with those risks, and they kind of leads them to walk to the horse's trough basically, and being able to show them this is why I see these things. And, I actually had the finance background before I was even a libertarian in the first place. And trust me, my dad was a ranger and a sniper in Vietnam. He was a military guy. My dad, or my grandfather, was in World War II. My great grandfather was in World War One. I was going to go serve the country and all that stuff. And I had the belief of the country from a young age, and the whole, what we're doing is to preserve our democracy, and we're only fighting bad guys, I'll say, overseas, right? Which maybe is true to a degree, but most of the time we're the bad guys. But at the end of the day, I was able to figure out what was actually occurring through the math, through the economics, through the finance background, and seeing what was happening and how the money flowed, and listening to people like George Gammon on YouTube, and other people to explain the deeper dive aspects of how the money flows and how the system works as a whole. And then you start to see that all these different companies are owned by the same companies, and how, where the control goes. And you see the narratives out there across the board with all these different companies. And so it's plain as day. They may not want to admit that, my investors may not want to admit sometimes all that. And it's a hard thing to think about, right? You don't want to be negative and think that everything's bad and all this stuff, and they're going to control us all. Obviously, the more people that are awake and see it, the more power we all have together combined. And so I try to come of it from a positive standpoint and say, look, this is what I'm seeing, but this is how we fight back. This is what we do. And we got to become entrepreneurs and help communities ourselves. And I think we have a duty to make money and be able to help the communities around us and help other people see what's happening, and start to push away from centralization, more towards diversification, and, diversified agriculture, diversified healthcare, and, or I'll say decentralized, for example, on these different, major concepts for our standard of living, so that those government bodies don't control us, so that we do have the power. And so I take the stance of empowering many of my investors and teaching them the different things that I see, but also with the premise that I could be completely wrong, right? This is just my perception of reality, right? We're all perceiving things totally differently based on, our unique circumstances and our environment and things like that. And so if you look at things where you can always be wrong, then there's really no emotional stubbornness that can occur. Now, don't get me wrong. You ask my wife, I'm emotionally stubborn in in certain instances, but at the same time, if you have that, lack of chip on your shoulder, and saying, yeah, maybe I am wrong about this, it's the best way to be able to wake yourself up to what is really actually going on, because then you're receptive to potential changes in mindset and personalities and things like that, right? So I think all of that kind of stuff is super important to understand, and not being stubborn, not going out and saying no, my way is the right way and that's it, because that's just your perception of reality. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, and you also earlier you mentioned something about paying closer attention to economics, and obviously there's so many different resources out there, and many of which are there to distract you from what's really going
Yes.
on. It even reminds me, but maybe we can even talk about the fact that this year's an election year. I've basically been convinced of this one from Jeff Berwick, that there's no such thing as elections; they're all selections,
Yeah.
and it doesn't
Yeah.
really matter who's driving the ship. So we can talk about that soon here too. But I'd like to know, like, where do you find yourself going for consistent, trustworthy information?
So it's kind of funny. I really like there's a site called shadowstats.com that I like to follow. There's certain people on YouTube, like I was mentioning George Gammon, that I like to follow. I like to follow pure economists out there, and then I also go to. It's kind of funny. Zero Hedge is a great place that I go to, because, and it's funny. It's all the articles are written by Tyler Durden from Fight Club, because at the end he wanted to blow up the banks and start over and basically blow up the system in itself and start the system over. And that was, kind of a funny, ironic thing, because they report on the actual data. For example, you hear in the media the job reports are amazing, et cetera. Like, we're seeing major jobs, and this is all political hype. It's not actually reality. The only jobs we had that were added were mostly part-time jobs. And if you look at what happened during 2020, all those part-time jobs were gone, and now they're just starting to come back. And so they're counting them as new jobs. It's like, let's destroy the jobs and then make them all come back so that we look better now on this election year, right? And so finding real data out there is really, really key. And you have to be able to read the articles and extrapolate the data yourself, because this is all just opinion out there, period, right? All news is just opinions. Yeah, you might have charts and data, and you can make your own opinion based on that data and what's actually occurring. And I think, Zero Hedge, places like that, places like Shadow Stats, people like George Gammon, all of those different types of people. I watch the Nomad Capitalist quite a bit and understand tax strategies internationally and stuff like that as well. But getting a diversified education base on financial education and economics really paints a different picture than what the narratives are. And once you start seeing the real picture versus what the narratives are, you start to be able to realize, wow, that company, that news outlet's full of shit. This one's full of shit. This one is too. All of these ones are full of it. Even the ones that you might tend to agree with, many times are just fluff articles that don't really tell you anything or have a one-sided opinion. So you can see it on both sides of the spectrum, where they're all just marketing, instead of actually trying to tell you good data and good information, which is now out there because of the internet, because of YouTube and stuff like that. You can pretty much get a master's degree on YouTube now. It's insane. So it's really, really interesting, the
Or
different
people
resources.
can get their master's degree in real estate straight from you, can't they, on YouTube?
Yeah, they really can. I have a YouTube channel. It's OCG Masters of Real Estate. So, and I love teaching people that stuff, because it empowers them on a new strategy to be able to create true financial freedom in their life. And when they have financial freedom, they have the time to review these economic articles. They have the time to try to come out and help the community. And I try to do responsible investing and invest in the right types of assets that are gearing me for success long term and gearing society for success. One of the things that I'm actually extremely interested in right now is I found a company called Farm Pods, where they're creating literally farms, hydroponic farms inside shipping containers. They cost about 80,000 bucks. They're all hooked up to like systems inside of solar systems and all that kind of stuff to for power, and they produce $40,000 a year worth of food. But talk about decentralizing food. That's such an amazing concept, to be able to realize that, hey, if you're able to enact a program like that and it becomes decentralized, you take away the power of some of these very big corporations that have a stranglehold on society because of this. And if you think about how sick America is, for example, and a lot of it has to do with the big giant food companies where we get all of our food from. And, I look at that as such an amazing opportunity to help everyone be healthier individuals. And of course, when they're not healthy, then they spend more on big pharma, So, so these are the things that I think about when I'm investing and trying to teach people the strategies that I deploy is, play into what society needs, and you will gain all the investors that you need. I invest in mobile home parks quite a bit because low cost housing is important. We help people invalidate credit card debt, for example. We, do workforce housing, all different types of strategies to for the need in the community at the time, right?
Yeah, I love it, and it reminds me we had a libertarian presidential candidate on the show not too long ago, and he said something similar, which is, he believes the purpose of life is for all of us to really find our own path and solidify what your path, what your calling is, and a lot of us can get distracted by what maybe it is that our families want us to have for our path, which is fine. Like that, there is beauty in that, and there's some strength and security in following a path maybe your family's laid out for you. But to your point, like Matt, if you followed your family's path, I'd be talking to a 5-star general right now.
Yeah, yeah.
You wouldn't be on the show. So um, we have a link in the actually to our team. I see you guys sent it to me here on Signal. If you could get that in the thread as well, it's Matt's YouTube channel. Just want to make sure everyone has a chance to go work on their masters of real estate. If they're interested, it's a great place to go. Also, if you are tuning in now or listening on the replay, this is ANCAP Radio. Make sure you give Mathew Owens, our guest today, a follow. Hit the like button, the retweet button. We're going to keep rocking here until 4 o'clock Eastern. And in about 10 minutes, we're going to open up the door for callers. So if you do have any questions or comments, get them ready. In about 8 minutes, we'll open up there. So you live in California. That's always a
Yes.
that's always a living in America is a conversation starter for ANCAPs. Living in California, it's I can relate. I live in Ontario, Canada. It's like, what? You live where they like don't let you breathe? I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess. So tell us, how have you navigated living in what's perceived to be the most socialist place in North America?
Yeah, and it's definitely hard to realize what's actually happening in Canada and California and New York and some of these places where pretty soon it's going to be like Minority Report, where if you think about a crime, you're going to go get or think about talking trash about the government, you're going to be in a bad spot, So and they're going to be coming after you. But right now living in the only reason I live, there's a couple of reasons I live here. One, I've lived here my whole life, right? I grew up in Southern California. I actually live in a very, I'll say, conservative area. It's not, very socialist here. A lot of my kids go to a private school that is called Free Society Academics that teaches entrepreneurship and public speaking and trade and barter and all that kind of stuff. There's no way I would let them go to public schools in California, where during COVID they were trying to pass emergency bills so that they could jab your kids without your knowledge and without your consent and things like that, which was insane. Luckily, they got it stopped because the community came up and said, "Absolutely not! You're insane." And and the place that I live right now is more like that, where they're, I'm in Orange County area, Southern California, which is a lot more conservative type area, and a lot of them people were not wearing masks. They weren't complying with that stuff. I just mentioned to you, I'm wearing a "I will not comply" T-shirt right now. So I feel like it's my duty to be in the epicenter here and say, no, F you, I'm not complying with this stuff. This is what's happening, And and I would walk into restaurants and, just ignore them when they're like, you can't have a mask until you, are seated at your table. And this is the most retarded thing on the planet, right? And so fighting back is one piece of it. But, of course, the weather is insane. I like talking trash to my friends in the Midwest when it's snowing out there and it's 70 degrees out here. It's pretty awesome. And then it's just a matter of making sure that hey, I'm able to keep up with the standard of living here. I'm able to also not pay taxes, right? And understand the tax code well enough to be able to really minimize your tax base. And, so far I've been able to really do that through multiple different strategies via cost segregation studies, via, different business structures in different ways that I've been able to implement to really minimize that burden, except for the $800 California fee, which I have so many entities that I could probably pay for my housing doing that. So it's a matter of the math. I'm paying this much more money in taxes here comparatively to, say, moving to Florida or Texas. And, how much is the weather worth to me right now? Now, if I have a giant payday on one year, I'm probably going to be looking for another place. And don't get me wrong, during the whole, fake COVID pandemic, in my opinion, we were basically looking for places. I'm going, where I need a farm somewhere in the middle of nowhere to stay away from people because the government's gone mad, But I also grow my own food in Southern California here at my house, and try to eat as organically as I can as well, So it's a matter of dealing with the headache and how much is it really costing you. Is it, obviously I'm paying a lot of money in gasoline costs and extra taxes and things like that, and it's actually starting to get a little dangerous now, right? You're starting to see homeless all over the place because the politicians are making money off of the homeless problem. So they have no incentive to actually fix it in the first place. And so that adds danger, right? I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and want to make sure they're protected. I don't want them walking around the block. Even though I live in a pretty safe area in Orange County, you still see things happening and get concerned with all the damn pedophiles out there all across that are becoming normalized now. It's insane. And so, these are the things that I think are, concerning me and making me look to actually get the hell out. At the same time, it's a difficult thing. I have a massive family here as well that is, difficult to move out of California. But don't get me wrong, I'm looking, and I'm looking for my bug out location also, so that we can actually, find a place of self sustaining, right? So.
Right, right, and we'll have to. I know I think I connected you guys during Christmas time, so it might have fell off. But Dave Henderson, who's a co-founder here in ANCAP Radio, has got a pretty cool setup and a lot of connections in New Zealand. Which New Zealand is another kind of you can argue that it's a socialist paradise as well. But I know
Right.
Doug's spoken very highly of it. Obviously, really anything in Latin and Central America is super popular. I'm kind of with you where it's like, especially with younger kids, there's certain aspects of family that you just can't quite replace, which is really how we ended up here in Ontario. And
Right.
it was either Doug or someone in our circle that said, as long as you can get out of where you live to a new location in less than 3 days, as long as if shit hits the fan and you got a plan to get out and go somewhere else, maybe diversify to another country, whatever it is, like that's really true freedom, is just having the options to do so. Because, right, like you said, in this very moment, are you in danger? I mean, I guess you could argue maybe somehow, but like for the
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
part, like you're in a beautiful, beautiful, like the most beautiful weather in North America, which is that's the part that kind of pisses me off about California. Is like, man, I would want to live there, even though
Right.
I guess they've targeted that as obviously the best place to tax for that reason. So, um, yeah, I guess I just got to agree
and
with a lot,
and
a
there
lot of your
is
statements there.
there is a lot of wealth here as well, of course. So and you have a lot of private investors here, a lot of capital here, because you have to have wealth to be able to live, in this area. The housing prices are through the roof, and that's another issue with a government problem. The reason why the housing prices are so much is not necessarily just because of the demand. It's because the government will not, it takes 2 3 years to get a permit approved to add housing, and so it doesn't pencil to add low cost housing to the community, right? So so you're left to private entrepreneurs to solve those types of problems, right? And the government's LA, it could take literally 3 years to get permits approved to get something through, and they charge you like crazy for all their little things they want you to do to the property in order to get it there. So I don't invest in California specifically, other than having my primary residence. But the only reason I'm really here is I can't take my kids away from grandma, right? You know what I mean? And that's really the reason. But like you said, having a bug out location, a secondary location you can go to is key. And being able to get out at the right time when you're going to have a big tax windfall or something like that that is going to cost you money, and it being prepared for that is really important. And I even think, having a location out of the US is important too. I think there's probably a war going on to try to take the US down a few notches, if not hyperinflate the entire currency, which I think is probably going to occur. In which case it's super important to grow your own food, and have that exit plan to get the hell out if you needed to, in multiple countries, as well as multiple states, to in having your own supply of food and water and that kind of stuff that you can rely on. So it's a matter of protecting yourself and protecting your family. And if you are going to live in a place like communism California, then of course you want to make sure that's in place soon, as soon as you can, right? So
Yes. So tell us about some of the strategies and ways that you are able to, going back to the topic of today's discussion, how are you investing in the U.S. and U.S. real estate, and also keeping those profits? How are you capitalizing and keeping as much as you can to yourself? I think a lot of our listeners tend to come from the gold, silver, mining background, as well as cryptocurrencies, stocks, trading options. But I feel like I could be wrong. ANCAP Radio, you guys can speak up. Real estate investing isn't too popular here in this circle, or just geographically for ANCAP. So um, it's two sided question now. I guess is like, how would you recommend someone who's invested in the other assets that I just mentioned to look at U.S. real estate, and then how are you ensuring that you're keeping what you deserve?
yeah, so first thing is first is you want to invest in the states that are less socialism. So I'll say landlord friendly states versus tenant friendly states, so that way you can keep and retain your rights. And so that is super important to understand when you're investing in different markets around the U.S. Secondarily, there's strategies out there where I just buy property and get big tax deductions in the same year that I actually buy it. So a year ago, I bought I invested about 600,000 into a mobile home park, and in year one got a $600,000 year one tax deduction to be able to go against my stuff via bonus depreciation. Right, so massive tax deductions and tax wins, and I'm structured in a way to be able to massively take advantage of that from the financial side through having tons of rental income and things like that coming in to be able to make the majority of my income in those ways. And so from that strategy, I don't pay a lot of taxes, right? I also go through and deduct as much as I can in different ways and shift income from in different years. Take do capital expenditures and income shifting from one year to the next, for example, and diversify my base into long-term wealth building activities that don't take a lot of taxes and short-term type stuff. I also self-direct my own retirement accounts into real estate, so I don't have to pay tax on those for the long run as well. So these are the strategies that can be implemented across the board to really not pay tax, and you don't necessarily need your own money to do this. You can be raising money from other operators or other investors to be able to buy real estate and create these cash flow streams, because through these cash flow streams, you create financial freedom in your life. Now you have the freedom to go build your farm in the middle of nowhere to stay away from people and to be self-sustaining, right? You have that financial freedom and that cash flow to be able to make the choices that you should be making to protect yourself and your family. And that's the biggest reason why you should be focused on finding these additional cash flow streams. Yeah, crypto's dope. Gold and silver is dope. That's a great insurance policy to make sure that when the currency goes to crap, you're taken care of. You have an insurance policy in place, but that doesn't give you any immediate cash flow right now. And people might think, oh wow, well they might nationalize housing. That could happen at one point, and I'll make that decision to sell that stuff and buy something in a different country at that point, right? And I'm also looking to diversify in other countries as well, to diversify my base. And so, but if you're going out and you are specifically focused on, you know, finding these cash flow streams, you can really build your wealth and have the freedom that you're looking for in your life. You know, and you can actually go out and do this to where you can utilize the housing as an inflation hedge. Also, maybe the inflation rate's 10%, right, or 15% in real numbers, and but the house is only going up at a 5% rate, or something along those lines. Fine, that you're losing purchasing power. But if you have debt against that building as well, that debt is getting decimated at the same rate as inflation too. So you're really compounding your wealth building effect through that and keeping up with inflation by decimating that debt. So there's strategies just like a gold and silver or a crypto investor would want to use to preserve their currency with real estate too, by utilizing debt in different ways.
I love it. And one thing that just ran through my head there as you were going is um, not a lot, but there's a decent chunk of listeners that we have um, that are not from the U.S. or living outside the U.S. but might want to invest in U.S. real estate, especially after you kind of just painted that awesome picture there. I know you can't speak to every country around the world and how that works or what that would look like, but I do know you personally have worked with several foreign investors before. So could you
Yep.
kind of walk us through at least what that looks like based on your personal experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's different. So if you're looking at investing in the U.S. Or you're raising capital from international investors to invest here, then you want to go on within those countries. So if I'm dealing with Canada or Japan or China or any other major country, there's usually a tax treaty that says, hey, you have to withhold this much federal tax and remit it to the government. It's usually the max tax rate. There are ways around it and different strategies you can implement to not have that type of withholding. You could be deemed as running a business in the US and not have that withholding happen and have a US entity set up as well. And so there might be withholding requirements if you're investing internationally into the US. Specifically on the income that you make in the US. And then that's basically their guarantee that you're going to file a tax return if they withhold the maximum and then let you file your return for your refund at the end of the year, right? So that's how they get you, I'll say, into the system if you're investing internationally. At the same time, you can still use those same tax benefits I mentioned to you and front loading the depreciation and different strategies here in the US for your US income and pay very, very little, if not no tax. While you're investing here in the US. And that's actually one of the strategies that you should be implementing. If you're investing internationally, you do not have to know every aspect of the operations of real estate. You can invest with other operators that are already doing it here and be able to take advantage of their expertise and their knowledge base and their learning curve that they've already been through and invest passively into investments here in the US. As you know, you're basically investing in stock of the company that owns specific real estate assets, whether that's mobile home parks, whether that's multifamily, single family, debt instruments. There's all different, any investment that's here in the US, you could invest in through syndication investments and working with different operators that are basically already experts in their field. Be careful though, not all experts. You got to do your homework, but that is the biggest key. And so internationally, you got withholding. You still got to do a U.S. tax return, of course, each time, and you got to do that with that quarterly withholding or withholding upon each payment. And if you're an operator operating real estate and you're trying to bring in U.S. or out of the country money, and you don't withhold, you could be held liable for that money for that international investor that invested. So it's important to make sure you do it right, that they get the right tax planning advice. And I utilize international CPAs to help with these structures to make sure they research the tax treaties, make sure I know that what types of income are exempt from withholding and how to structure it for the best structure for my international clients, or if you're investing internationally yourself, you want to be able to learn these structures so that you are not just being taken advantage of by investing here.
Totally, and I think except for just from hearing you kind of break it down there again, especially international perspective, it probably is the legal perspective that intimidates a lot of folks just on the
Right.
front end. It sounds like once you're once you've committed and once you're in, it might not be as stressful as it sounds on the outside looking in. So I'm just curious, have you ever had any personal experiences where you were like, oh shit, like that was a close call or anything like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. In the beginning, like we actually went and we were trying to raise money from Japanese investors in Japan, and and put a fund and a syndication together to go do that, and we started marketing it to Japanese investors in Japan. And the Japanese Ministry of Finance came out and said, which is I guess the Japanese version of the SEC, and came in and said, well, you need a $10 million bond. You got to go through this process to be able to get licensed to do it here and stuff. Otherwise, you can't market it to the Japanese investors. And so we're like, okay, well, I guess we won't market it to them. We'll just leave it here in the U.S. and they can find us, So and they really can't do a lot, but at the same time, we didn't want to not comply with their stuff because we didn't want our investors to get come down on by them, and so we just kind of left it alone. But that was a really close call because it could have been a big problem if we violated the Japanese Ministry of finance laws, right? And not knowing, even though we're based in the US and our attorneys here, of course, had no freaking idea what that was. We had to literally consult with a Japanese SEC attorney or Ministry of Finance attorney, along with our SEC attorney here, which was insane, and pay a lot of damn money too to learn that stuff.
Yeah. Well, again, that's why again I want to encourage everyone, if you haven't already, to check out all of the links down below in the thread. I did see. I forgot I sent this to our team before we went live, but I've got a picture of you and I in Cabo, Matt. So a little
Saw
entertainment for
that.
everyone there. But make sure you
That's
check out
awesome.
Matt's stuff for further information. I mean, I've checked out his channel before. He's even done a few sessions with our mastermind that I know he repurposed on there that are really helpful from an information perspective. Um, Look, I'm just looking at the Cabo pic. I mean, Cabo, when we went there, that actually really impressed me. I didn't realize how similar the weather was there to kind of like where you're at. Is that a potential destination, or is that? I also heard that's the one part of Mexico that's become too socialist as well.
It could very well be. I think, Mexico in general, I'm a fan of from a freedom perspective now, a lot more than here in the US. And it's one of the locations, just like, Berwick was saying about where to go and, live in as a bug out location, I'll say, to get out of the US if you needed to very quickly. So and I think a lot of Americans are thinking that way as well, and starting to realize, wow, there are some really good opportunities here in Mexico to be able to do that and get a piece of land and a place that maybe it's not going crazy as fast. You just got to watch out for the cartel, right? So so but
What where what are some things that you're seeing unfold here into 2024? Especially as someone with kids, and I look at it the same for myself. Is like where is the hope? Where is the optimism? I think you could find it if you look hard enough. Like what are some things that have happened recently and that are unfolding this year that kind of give you a reason to smile?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the biggest things and the benefits that I think occurred out of the totalitarian COVID stuff that occurred was a lot of people, even though at first were scared and were like, oh my God, we better go do this. And they got scared into submission in a lot of ways, and panic. And I think that obviously is all on purpose to do that, to scare people so that way they comply. But at the end of the day, now everybody I talk to, even crazy like socialists and people that want to take away your guns and all this stuff and don't know history about what governments have done to people, um, are realizing to a degree that we've all been lied to, and this is all fake, and look at what's going on with the system. You know how many people that I talk with now that are just, it's like common knowledge that we live in the damn matrix, and we everything we've been told is a lie. So you start to realize that stuff and realize, like, oh wow, people are waking up to seeing what's going on, and seeing what's happening out there right now. And that's really an optimistic thing, because that's really all it takes to be able to topple governments and stop their totalitarian wishes, I'll say in different ways, is to be able to make sure that people are awake and are not being faked out by the lies. The problem is the lies are rampant now, and we gotta really, everything we hear is probably a lie, or getting just to poke and prod us in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, many, many things. This radio station being one of them, are some of the benefits of that era. I remember being in the thick of it, also still in Canada at the time as well. On an I always like to tell people that I was trapped on an island in Canada during COVID, so that was an experience within itself. But um, and now that I say that, the point I was going to make slips my mind. But oh, you know what? This is what it was. Where you where are your spidey senses tingling as far as who's the real Wizard of Oz here? Like, there's the deep state, then there's the deep state, and then there's God knows what. I wouldn't say aliens. That's like an old school way of looking at it, but Illuminati. You could say Zionist is like a buzzword right now. There's the whole Middle East
I
stuff
mean,
going on. Like,
we,
who's the
we,
real puppet master?
we could talk about the lizard people all we want, and then no, I'm just messing around. So,
Exactly.
I mean, look, I don't know, right? I mean, people talk about it being, the some main families that aren't even the Rockefellers and Rothschilds and things like that. They're even more hidden than they are, and they if you look at the banking systems and who owns the banking systems, and you see who owns the majority of all companies across the world, it's you're looking at BlackRock, right? And State Street, Vanguard, these big companies, and they all own each other. Also, it's a big intertwined web that basically controls all Fortune 500 companies across the board, right? So, and if you go to Yahoo and go look at the ownerships of the top five, or like top 100 companies in the U.S., you'll see that it's the four Fortune 500 companies. You'll see that it's the majority of those companies, State Street, Vanguard, BlackRock, and those ones that own these companies. And so, realizing that, and it's like, who owns those? Well, it's a conglomerate of people's money and large families that have invested in these things for years, and a lot of that comes down to the foundations, right? The Clinton Foundation, the Gates Foundation, there's the Soros foundations, all these other foundations that we're seeing out there, that are poking and prodding in one way, shape, or form, and shifting what the narrative is and controlling these companies that are actually doing that, right? Like, why do you think, the whole Budweiser thing with Dylan Mulvaney, or, the whole, tranny thing came out, right? Is that they're screwing with people. They want chaos out there. The more chaos they throw out there, the more they can throw you in a different direction, and to not see what they're actually doing, with their bills and
Well,
stuff like that,
didn't I see Kid Rock ended up inking a deal with Bud Light? Wasn't
But
that
see,
like? Did you
did
see
that
that?
actually happen? I thought that was what the UFC guy, what's Dana White. I thought he did that and he was like, got paid like $100 million or something like that. He's like, hey, I'm not giving up $100 million. And I get it. That's a hard thing to do, but you look at all this and see through that who's actually controlling people, but you never going to know who the biggest families are, that we probably have never heard their names, or they're so hidden it's ridiculous, right? So we're probably still paying the crown as well, here in the U.S. So
Sure.
you look at these things, and it's always going to be hidden, but it's a matter of realizing that we do truly have the power if we just say no. We're not doing it anymore, right? But the majority of the people have to have the balls to do that, right? And that's not an easy thing to do unless they've been pushed. And I feel like the whole COVID thing pushed them in that direction to wake up to that control, that they're trying to have over society. And people are starting to push back and say no. How many comments I get every time I wear my "I will not comply" T-shirt, or my make 1984 fiction again, or after the George Orwell novel of the totalitarian police state. It's like, people are realizing and saying, wow, yeah, that's accurate, so
From a business perspective, how are you planning on leveraging this I mean, really, the way you look at it, the way you just painted it too, it is a bit of an awakening, and I think there is a shift taking place where some of these Goliaths that have been successfully and quietly hiding behind the scenes, they are getting a little bit more exposed now, which is nice. It does feel like a victory. So, I mean, how do you see you leveraging your business along with the political trends of the world, or do you just see them as two completely separate, like different things?
So no, I think you need to stick and move and adjust your businesses with what is changing in the economy and realize what's happening globally and be able to protect yourself and invest in a diversified pool of different assets that are going to sustain long term. And I think that it's important to make sure that you are diversified enough to where internationally you have income and property, as well as here in the U.S. And you have different companies and income streams in those areas because it could be, disrupted, worldwide, which I think is what this next, crash is probably going to occur, is a worldwide type crash, and they're going to probably utilize, World War III to be able to do that crash, which is very unfortunate. At the same time, I just want to be able to stay away from everybody at that time and be on an island somewhere. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think adjusting your strategies for what is actually occurring in the market is one of the most important things you can do to protect yourself, and having that backup plan, and getting off of all the tracking and everything, being kind of a ghost as much as you can, it would be important, if you're long run from a privacy perspective, across the board. I think the privacy is going to be more and more sought after with the age of technology now, because they pretty much track you everywhere you're going and everything right now, So,
Right. What are you looking into right now in regards to your future with real estate investing? I know I believe, you correct me if I'm wrong, you've kind of scaled things back a bit from the operational side. You want to be more on the side of deploying the capital, maybe actively raising still as well. But kind of what's your investment thesis for the next 5 years?
yeah, I'm investing in case of a massive recession. So I'm looking at mobile home parks very closely because I like investing in those, because it's the multifamily tenant will move down to a mobile home park. You're always going to have a set base of supply for some of the cheapest housing in the country that you can get from a monthly basis, right? And that so I like those strategies. I'm investing in non-performing credit card debt type companies to wipe out people's credit cards, because I think that's going to be more and more prevalent in the future as well. I'm investing in the workforce housing stuff because you can't build it for the cost you're buying them for right now, and so long term, those prices are going to continue to rise, and I'm trying to utilize leverage as best I can to decimate that debt at the same time to compound my wealth building effect. So, and I'm also investing in gold and silver, and different commodities and things like that that I think are a insurance policy in my mind. I don't invest a ton in those. I'd like to invest more, but it's a matter of, hey, I want the cash flow too, right? So that cash flow gives you the freedom to maneuver and get out when you need to get out, and build the right infrastructure for yourself to be able to be free when something bad does happen, right? And be able to get out quickly.
Totally. And aside from business and spreading the good word of freedom, what's Matthew Owens doing these days to have some fun? I think you told me you were coaching your kids in sports, which, dude, I'm really looking forward to that day. We're not quite there yet, but yeah, what are you doing for fun, man?
Yeah, I have two kids. I'm not allowed to have fun. That's the whole thing. But no, yeah, I really, really do enjoy my son. I coach basketball for him consistently, and it's really cool to see the little kids look at you for approval and get that confidence that you're giving them as they, get to know the sport and stuff like that, and get to know the get their confidence level up as they play, right? And see them improve and look at you like we picked up a 7-year old on our shoulders because he got had the game winner, me and some parents, and you know that kid is never going to forget that, right? I had a girl that wanted to quit, and I told her, hey, stand under the basket, right here for every time, because these stupid boys are just going to keep shooting and not listening or passing. So, and she got like 6 7 baskets a game. Her mom and her came up to me just basically saying, hey, wow, this is, she really loves the sport. Thank you so much. And she did it 2 seasons in a row. Came back to me afterwards, thanking me for her interest in basketball. You don't realize how much of an impact you can make on these kids. And I made a deal with my son. I said, for every basket you make, which he makes one of three, you get a minute of iPad time. So it's the best deal I've ever made him, because he's shooting like 180 shots a day right now, so he can get 1 hour of iPad time a day. It's the most awesome thing ever. So, and then my daughter, she beats me up emotionally. She's 5 years old, and but I'm getting her into basketball, and getting to spend extra time with her, one-on-one time and stuff like that, and really being able to live in the moment a lot with her, and it's been pretty awesome to be able to spend that time and teach her these things and these concepts. And both of my kids' favorite song is by a rapper by the name of Tom McDonald, and the song is titled "The System," and he talks about the entire Matrix system and everything, and they're singing along, and my wife is rolling her eyes at me, of course, because they're listening to all of his songs where he's basically very anti-government and stuff, and he's a self-made label and everything, where he gets like 2 million views on YouTube within a weekend of releasing every song, and is top of the charts without a record label. So he's not part of that whole system. So it's pretty interesting and fun to teach them the anti-government ways too. That's probably one of the funnest things I like doing.
That's great. I can see. I could see my wife is similar, where she knows I'm crazy, similar to it sounds like your wife, but after I get going too much, she just starts to roll her eyes, and she tunes out. On that note, they say happy wife, happy life, and obviously
Yes.
investing time with the kids and coaching them and all that is really helpful for the marriage as well. But yeah, what are you doing to keep things strong and happy with the wife?
Yeah, we do we go out to lunch on Fridays typically, and try to spend that personal time together. I try to give her that, attention of actually having a conversation. Most men are just quiet. They don't want to have that conversation, of course, and they're just like, no, leave me alone. I'm tired. Whatever it is. But I try to go through and have have conversations with her consistently, and spend the time, and just being she just wants me to hang out with the family. So if I'm with her and the kids and spending time in the moment, that's the most important piece of most relationships, is being in the moment with them. And and we get along great. We talk a lot of trash, of course, to each other. She threatens to take half my money, and I threaten to bury her in the government if or bury her in the desert if she tries to do that. Messing around. So and we're just we joke around all the time, and we've got along joking consistently, and we have a pretty great relationship, and we've been able to communicate effectively. And I think that comes with entrepreneurship as well, and running your own business, and you know having to be emotionally self-aware, right? That's the key to most strong relationships, is that emotional self-awareness, to not be stubborn again and say, hey, look, I could be wrong. Is this just my perception of you pissing me off right now? You know what I mean? When that happens, right? So
Right. All right. Well, we're going to start winding it down. Before we do, Matt, just like to get your honest take, man. What was your number one key takeaway from today's conversation?
man, I love talking to other people like you about this, because um I realize that I'm not alone, right? It can be lonely on the, I'll say libertarian, or I'll say anarchist side of things, and you don't have tons of people that are as crazy as you. So I appreciate you being as crazy as I am with this stuff.
Thank you, man. Yeah, we're gonna keep it rolling here too. What again? Just remind our audience, what are you working on right now, and what is the best way to follow up and get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can go to MathewOwens.com, MathewOwens. So one T in Matthew. I'm working on multiple funds. If you want to come talk to me about the different strategies we deploy and how we can help you create financial freedom in your life, then feel free to reach out or go onto my website. We also have multiple free giveaways on our website, from a due diligence checklist to a quick analysis tool where you can analyze any kind of flip in about five numbers. We have a free masterclass on how to raise capital and how to invest in real estate and find deals. So if you need any help, reach out. Let me know.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead and give him a follow as well. And we've got a bunch of links and information on Matt in the thread here below. So thank you again for tuning in to ANCAP Radio. Hit that like button, the retweet button. We'll be here live again next Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, or if you're in California like Matt, at noon. Again, next Thursday. Thank you for investing your most valuable resource with us here today, your time. To all our listeners and to you, Matt. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.